As the tornado sirens blared, the Wilson family raced to their backyard storm shelter. But the gate was locked. Their HOA had barred access for aesthetics. With their children in tow and the twister bearing down, they prayed the county would arrive in time. In a matter of minutes, lives hung in the balance. Sarah Wilson gripped the padlocked gate, her knuckles turning white. No, this can't be happening. The dark funnel cloud loomed menacingly in the distance, its roar growing louder by the second. "Mom, I'm scared," cried 8-year-old Lily, clutching her little brother. Sarah cursed under her breath, her heart pounding. She'd specifically installed this storm shelter to protect her family, and now the HOA had sealed them out. Beside her, husband Mark slammed his fist against the metal bars. "Damn it, we pay our dues every month. They can't do this." In the eerie green light, Sarah could see their neighbors peering out nervously from behind curtains. No one dared to intervene. "I'm calling 911, Mark said, fumbling for his phone. As he waited on hold, a deafening crack of thunder shook the ground. Lily started to cry. After an agonizing eternity, a dispatcher answered. "Please, our HOA had locked us out of our storm shelter. There's a tornado heading straight for us," Mark pleaded. "Okay, sir, we've dispatched the county emergency response. Try to get to the safest interior room of your home immediately." Sarah's legs felt like jelly as she ushered the kids inside. The howling wind was almost upon them now, tearing branches from the trees. She pulled Lily and Jonah close, whispering a desperate prayer. Moments later, the front door shuddered as the twister ripped through their neighborhood. The house groaned and creaked, windows shattering one by one. Sarah shielded the children with her body, bracing for the worst. Then, silence. The roar had passed, leaving eerie stillness in its wake. Cautiously, Sarah peeked out to assess the damage. Their usually pristine lawn was littered with debris. The old oak tree that had stood for decades now lay splintered on the ground. And there, at the back of the property, the storm shelter gate hung open, the padlock nowhere to be seen. She rushed outside, half expecting to find her family crushed beneath the rubble. But miraculously, the storm shelter remained intact. As she wrenched open the heavy door, she let out a sob of relief. "You're okay. You're all okay," she cried, pulling Lily and Jonah into a crushing embrace. Mark emerged, his face streaked with dirt and tears. "The county got here just in time," he said, his voice trembling. "They cut the lock and yelled for us to get inside. I don't know what would have happened if they hadn't." Sarah nodded, unable to speak. She gazed up at the darkening sky, silently thanking whatever force had intervened. Their home was a disaster, but her family was alive. As the first responders began canvassing the area, Sarah spotted a familiar figure approaching. It was Amanda, the HOA president. Her perfectly coiffed blonde hair was now disheveled, and her designer dress was stained with mud. "Mrs. Wilson, I don't know what to say," she stammered, wringing her hands. "We had no idea the storm would be this severe. We were just trying to maintain property values, I swear." Sarah held up a hand, cutting her off. "Save it. The county issued you a safety violation, didn't they?" Amanda nodded mutely, her face flushing with shame. "Good. I hope you learned your lesson." With that, Sarah turned and led her family back to the relative safety of their storm shelter, determined to see this through to the end. The following morning, Sarah Wilson surveyed the wreckage that had once been her idyllic suburban home. The tornado had stripped the roof clean off, exposing the charred interior. Shards of glass and splintered wood littered the lawn, and a thick layer of insulation blanketed everything in sight. As she moved gingerly through the debris, she spotted Amanda, the HOA president, speaking animatedly with a group of men in uniform. Straightening her shoulders, Sarah approached them. "Mrs. Wilson," Amanda said, her voice uncharacteristically meek. "The county inspectors are here to assess the damage. They have a few questions for you. One of the men, a burly officer with a stern expression, turned to Sarah. Ma'am, I'm Sergeant Harris with the County Emergency Management Department. We received multiple calls about the HOA's actions during the storm. Can you tell us exactly what happened? Sarah recounted the harrowing events of the previous night, her voice quivering with emotion. If the county hadn't arrived when they did, my family might not be alive. That padlock nearly cost us everything. Sergeant Harris nodded grimly. We're issuing the HOA a severe safety violation. Their decision to restrict access to the storm shelter put lives at risk. They'll be facing stiff penalties and potential legal action. Amanda's face paled. But we were only trying to maintain property values. We didn't think the storm would be that bad. That's no excuse, the sergeant snapped. You willfully disregarded your residents' safety. The law is clear on this. Storm shelters must be accessible at all times during severe weather. He turned to Sarah. Mrs. Wilson, we'd like you to file an official complaint. This needs to be on the record. Sarah didn't hesitate. Absolutely. I'd want to make sure this never happens to anyone else. As the inspectors continued their investigation, Sarah retreated to the relative calm of the storm shelter. Mark was there, cradling a sleeping Lily and Jonah. The county's going to make sure the HOA pays for this, Sarah said, sinking down beside him. They really messed up, putting our lives in danger like that. Mark wrapped a comforting arm around her. I'm just glad we're all safe. I can't imagine what would have happened if the tornado had hit while we were locked out. Sarah shuddered at the thought. We need to make some changes. I don't want to live in fear of the next storm. I agree, Mark said. Maybe it's time we looked into moving somewhere with better infrastructure and less meddling bureaucracy. Sarah nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. Whatever happened next, she was determined to ensure her family's safety, even if it meant taking on the entire HOA single-handedly. Over the next few days, the Wilsons' neighborhood became a flurry of activity as cleanup efforts commenced. Crews worked tirelessly to restore power and clear the debris that littered the streets. But for Sarah and her family, the real battle was just beginning. Sarah had wasted no time in filing an official complaint with the county regarding the HOA's reckless actions. She knew the violation they'd received was just the start. She was determined to ensure the HOA faced the full consequences of their decision. As she sat in the kitchen, sipping lukewarm coffee, Mark entered carrying a stack of documents. You're not going to believe this. I just got off the phone with the county inspector. The HOA is being fined $50,000 for the violation. Sarah's eyes widened. $50,000. That's a substantial penalty. Mark nodded. And that's not all. They have 30 days to bring the storm shelter access up to code or face even stiffer fines and potential criminal charges. Good, Sarah said, her voice laced with resolve. They deserve everything they get. I just hope it's enough to make them think twice before pulling a stunt like that again. Just then, the doorbell rang. Sarah opened the door to find Amanda, the HOA president, standing on her doorstep. The woman's usually impeccable appearance was disheveled, and her eyes were red-rimmed, as if she'd been crying. Mrs. Wilson, I need to speak with you, Amanda said, her voice quivering. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside, allowing the woman to enter. What is it? Amanda wrung her hands nervously. I wanted to apologize, personally, for what happened. I had no idea the storm would be that severe. We were just trying to maintain the aesthetic of the neighborhood. But I realize now that we put your family's safety at risk. That was unforgivable. Sarah regarded the woman with a mixture of sympathy and skepticism. Do you have any idea how terrifying it was, standing there helpless as that tornado approached? My children were seconds away from being trapped in that shelter with no way out. Amanda nodded, her eyes downcast. I can only imagine. And I'm sorry from the bottom of my heart. I know the county has fined us heavily, and, well, we may not be able to recover from this." She paused, taking a deep breath. "I want you to know that I've already begun the process of changing our bylaws to ensure this never happens again. Storm shelter access will be a top priority, no exceptions." Sarah felt a flicker of surprise at the woman's admission. "That's good to hear, but it doesn't undo what happened." "I know," Amanda said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I understand if you can never forgive me. But I hope you can at least accept my apology." She turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm glad your family is safe." As the door closed behind her, Sarah stood there, conflicted. Part of her wanted to lash out, to demand more from the woman who had so callously endangered her loved ones. But another part of her recognized the genuine remorse in Amanda's words. With a heavy sigh, Sarah returned to the kitchen, where Mark was waiting expectantly. "What did she want?" he asked. "To apologize," Sarah replied, "and to let us know they're changing their policies on storm shelter access." Mark nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Well, at least that's something. But it doesn't undo the trauma we all went through." "No, it doesn't," Sarah agreed. She reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. "But maybe, in time, it can be a start." The Wilsons sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their ordeal hanging in the air. But as Sarah gazed out the window at the slowly recovering neighborhood, she felt a glimmer of hope. They had weathered the storm and emerged stronger for it. Now, it was time to look to the future. In the weeks that followed, the Wilsons' neighborhood slowly began to heal. Homes were repaired, debris was cleared, and the HOA held a series of town hall meetings to address the community's concerns. For Sarah, however, the scars of that fateful night were still raw. She found herself constantly on edge, jumping at the slightest sound of approaching storms. And every time she passed the now open storm shelter gate, a shiver ran down her spine. One afternoon, as she was tending to the newly replanted shrubs in her front yard, the familiar figure of Amanda approached. The HOA president looked somber, her usual perfectly coiffed appearance replaced by a more subdued demeanor. "Mrs. Wilson," Amanda said, her voice hesitant. "Do you have a moment?" Sarah straightened up, wiping the sweat from her brow. "What is it?" I wanted to follow up on our conversation the other day. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, and I feel absolutely terrible about it." Sarah nodded, her expression guarded. "I appreciate your apology, but it doesn't change the fact that you and the HOA put my family's lives in danger." Amanda winced, her gaze dropping to the ground. "I know, and I'm truly sorry. That's why I've been working to make some significant changes to our bylaws and emergency protocols." Sarah arched a skeptical eyebrow. "Such as?" "Well, for starters, we're making it mandatory for all homes in the neighborhood to have a functional storm shelter, and we're setting aside a portion of the HOA dues to help cover the cost of installation and maintenance." Amanda paused, meeting Sarah's gaze. "We're also requiring regular inspections to ensure accessibility and safety." Sarah felt a spark of surprise at the woman's words. "That's actually a good idea. I'm glad to hear you're taking this seriously." Amanda nodded. "And that's not all. We're also working with the county to establish a comprehensive emergency response plan, so that if something like this ever happens again, we'll be better prepared to protect our residents." Sarah couldn't help but feel a glimmer of respect for the woman's efforts. It was clear she was genuinely trying to make amends and prevent a similar tragedy from occurring. "I have to say, I'm impressed," Sarah admitted. "It sounds like you're really making an effort to fix this." "I am," Amanda said, her voice laced with determination. "What happened that night was an absolute travesty, and I'm committed to ensuring it never happens again. I know it will take time to rebuild the community's trust, but I'm hopeful that these changes will be a step in the right direction." Sarah considered the woman's words for a moment, then extended her hand. Well, I suppose I can at least appreciate your effort. Thank you for keeping me informed. Amanda's face lit up with a relieved smile as she shook Sarah's hand. Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. I know it won't be easy, but I'm determined to make things right. As Amanda turned and walked away, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of cautious optimism. Maybe, just maybe, this could be the start of a new chapter for their neighborhood. One where the safety and well-being of the residents truly came first. Over the next few months, the Wilsons watched as the changes promised by the HOA began to take shape. New storm shelters were installed throughout the neighborhood, and regular inspections were scheduled to ensure they remained accessible and well-maintained. Sarah, in particular, had been keeping a close eye on the developments, her initial skepticism slowly giving way to cautious optimism. She had to admit, the HOA seemed to be making a genuine effort to rectify their mistakes and prioritize the community's safety. One afternoon, as Sarah was taking her daily walk around the block, she noticed a flyer taped to a telephone pole. Curious, she stopped to read it. Neighborhood Emergency Preparedness Fair. Saturday, 10 a.m., 2 p.m. Come learn about the latest safety protocols, meet your local emergency responders, and tour our newly upgraded storm shelter facilities. Sarah felt a small smile tug at the corners of her mouth. This was exactly the kind of community engagement she had hoped to see from the HOA. Tucking the flyer into her pocket, she continued on her way, her steps a little lighter. When she returned home, she found Mark tinkering with their own storm shelter, making sure the emergency supplies were fully stocked. "Did you see the flyer about the emergency fair this weekend?" she asked, handing him the paper. Mark nodded, wiping the sweat from his brow. "I did. Looks like the HOA is really making an effort to get everyone involved." "That's what I was thinking," Sarah said, leaning against the shelter's frame. "It's a far cry from how they handled things before." "Yeah, well, I guess they finally learned their lesson," Mark said, his tone wry. "Though I still haven't forgotten what they put us through." Sarah reached out, giving his arm a gentle squeeze. "I know. But maybe this is a chance for a fresh start, for all of us." Mark regarded her thoughtfully for a moment, then nodded. "I suppose you're right. It's going to take time, but if they really are committed to change, then maybe we can move past this." Sarah smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. "I'm glad you feel that way. I was hoping we could all attend the fair together as a family. Lily and Jonah would probably enjoy it." "Sounds like a plan," Mark said, returning her smile. "It'll be good for them to see that the neighborhood is taking their safety seriously." As they stepped back inside the house, Sarah couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of hope. The scars of that fateful night might never fully heal, but perhaps, with the HOA's newfound commitment to change, they could build a stronger, safer community together. The morning of the Neighborhood Emergency Preparedness Fair dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the dark, stormy night that had nearly cost the Wilson family their lives. As Sarah, Mark, Lily, and Jonah made their way to the community center, a sense of cautious optimism hung in the air. Upon arriving, they were greeted by a flurry of activity. Booths and displays were set up, manned by local emergency responders, utility companies, and even representatives from the HOA. Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of relief at the level of organization and attention to detail. As they wandered through the fair, Lily and Jonah's eyes grew wide with fascination. They eagerly listened as firefighters demonstrated the proper way to use a fire extinguisher, and they marveled at the impressive size of the county's storm response vehicles. Sarah and Mark, meanwhile, made a beeline for the HOA's booth, where Amanda stood greeting visitors with a warm smile. "Mrs. Wilson, Mr. Wilson, I'm so glad you could make it," Amanda said, her tone genuine. "Please, let me show you what we've been working on." She guided them to a large model of the neighborhood, complete with miniature storm shelters and emergency access points. "As you can see, we've made significant upgrades to our infrastructure," Amanda explained. Each home now has a fully functional storm shelter, and we've installed emergency backup generators to ensure power during outages. Sarah nodded, impressed. That's a vast improvement from what we experienced. I have to say, I'm pleasantly surprised by the progress. We're committed to ensuring nothing like that ever happens again, Amanda said, her expression somber. I know it will take time to regain the community's trust, but I hope this is a step in the right direction. As they continued touring the exhibits, Mark paused to speak with a county emergency management specialist, while Sarah and the children explored a mock storm shelter setup. Mama, is this where we would have gone? Lily asked, her voice small. Sarah nodded, wrapping a comforting arm around her daughter. Yes, sweetheart. But this one is much nicer, and it's always going to be open for us, okay? Lily's eyes widened with understanding, and she gave her mother a tight hug. I'm glad we're safe now. Sarah blinked back tears, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. Me too, honey. Me too. As the fair drew to a close, the Wilsons made their way back home, their spirits lifted. The day had been a testament to the power of community, resilience, and the ability to learn from past mistakes. For Sarah, it was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always a glimmer of hope, a chance to build something better, stronger, and more secure. In the weeks following the Neighborhood Emergency Preparedness Fair, the Wilsons noticed a palpable shift in the community's atmosphere. Gone were the lingering tensions and mistrust that had permeated the air after the harrowing tornado incident. Instead, a newfound sense of unity and cooperation had taken hold. Sarah, in particular, found herself pleasantly surprised by the changes she observed. Neighbors who had once been strangers now greeted one another with genuine warmth, and the once dreaded HOA meetings had become forums for open and constructive dialogue. One evening, as the family sat around the dinner table, Lily piped up, her eyes shining with excitement. Mom, Dad, did you hear? The HOA is organizing a block party for next weekend. Sarah and Mark exchanged a glance, both of them remembering the tense, impersonal gatherings of the past. A block party, huh? Mark said, quirking an eyebrow. That's quite a change from their usual events. Well, I think it's a wonderful idea, Sarah said, reaching out to give Lily's hand a gentle squeeze. It'll be a great opportunity for everyone to come together and celebrate the progress we've made. As the day of the block party arrived, the Wilsons made their way outside, joining their neighbors in the streets. The air was filled with the aroma of grilled food, the laughter of children, and the sounds of lively music. Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of pride as she surveyed the scene. Gone were the carefully manicured lawns and pristine facades. In their place, a true community had taken root, one that celebrated diversity, engagement, and a shared commitment to safety. As she moved through the crowd, she spotted Amanda, the HOA president, engaged in a spirited conversation with a group of residents. Steeling her nerves, Sarah approached the woman, determined to extend an olive branch. Amanda, she said, drawing the woman's attention. I have to say, this block party is a wonderful idea. The neighborhood looks like it's really coming together. Amanda's face lit up with a warm smile. Mrs. Wilson, I'm so glad you could make it. And thank you. We've been working hard to foster a greater sense of community spirit. It shows, Sarah said, nodding approvingly. I have to admit, I was a bit skeptical about the HOA's changes at first, but it's clear you've all been making a genuine effort. We have, Amanda said, her expression turning serious. And we know there's still a lot of work to be done to rebuild trust. But events like this, where we can come together as neighbors, are an important step in the right direction. Sarah couldn't help but agree. As she scanned the crowd, she saw children playing, adults chatting animatedly, and a palpable sense of community that had been sorely lacking before. Well, consider me impressed, Sarah said, extending her hand. I'm glad we were able to move past the past and focus on the future. Amanda's face lit up as she shook Sarah's hand. "As am I, Mrs. Wilson. As am I." As the Wilsons settled in to enjoy the rest of the block party, Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The scars of that fateful night might never fully heal, but in this moment, she could see the beginnings of a brighter, safer future for her family and her community. In the months that followed the neighborhood block party, the Wilsons witnessed a remarkable transformation in their community. The once strained relationship between the residents and the HOA had blossomed into a genuine partnership, one built on trust, open communication, and a shared commitment to safety. Sarah, in particular, found herself increasingly involved in the HOA's efforts, lending her voice and expertise to the various committees and task forces that had been established. She took particular pride in the newly formed Emergency Preparedness Committee, which she co-chaired alongside Amanda. "This is exactly the kind of collaboration I was hoping to see," Sarah said during one of their meetings, her gaze sweeping across the room of engaged community members. "By working together, we can ensure that no family ever has to go through what we did." Amanda nodded, a grateful smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "I couldn't agree more. And I want to thank you, Mrs. Wilson, for your unwavering dedication to this cause. Without your input and advocacy, we wouldn't be where we are today." Sarah felt a surge of pride at the woman's words. It had been a long and challenging journey, but the progress they had made was undeniable. The storm shelters were now routinely inspected, emergency communication protocols were in place, and the community's overall preparedness had been significantly strengthened. As the meeting drew to a close, Sarah lingered behind, taking a moment to gaze out at the neighborhood she had come to love. The once manicured lawns and rigid aesthetics had given way to a more natural, vibrant landscape, a reflection of the community's newfound spirit. "Everything okay, honey?" Mark's voice broke the silence, and Sarah turned to find him standing beside her, a concerned expression on his face. "More than okay," she replied, reaching out to take his hand. "I was just thinking about how far we've come, and how grateful I am that we decided to stay and fight for this place." Mark pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "Me too. It hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it. Our family is safe, and this community is stronger than ever." Sarah nodded, leaning into his embrace. "I'm proud of us, Mark. We weathered the storm, and now we're building something even better." As they made their way back home, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of optimism about the future. The challenges they had faced had only served to strengthen their bond as a family and as a community. And though the scars of that fateful night would never fully heal, they had emerged from the darkness stronger, more resilient, and more connected than ever before.